Hello everyone, and welcome to the Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm out on a walk. I'm doing this on purpose because, frankly, I think better when I'm moving. And it's just one of those things, one of those ancient meditative techniques that for some reason when you walk, your brain works better. And this is a complicated subject that requires a lot of explanation. So I hope you forgive the road noise, and I don't have fancy microphones to block all that out. So I guess you just get to deal. I think that's the best way of being a jerk about it. Anyway, so this is going to be a long one because I want to give you all the good, I want to be accurate with you and give you the background on all of this, because I don't want you, because this information is definitely available in other sources all over the internet. However, it's also available in really abridged, short form content. But my job is to teach the mysteries in a way that gives the full context to the student. And for better or worse, it requires, there's no way to get through it in a short amount of time, right? There we have to go through the first part of the Arcanum when it comes to Astrothieology, and that's going to take a fair bit to put you in the right context, so you understand the right context of what it is that we're dealing with. And then we also have to go through the content itself. So this is more or less for the people who are willing to sit down and take it all in. Right, this is more for, I guess you'd say, more for the serious student who is not afraid to... Sorry, I just have to cross the road here. There's a walking path just down ahead of me I'm trying to get to, so we don't have to deal with all the road noise. I don't want to be hit by a car. Anyway, so this is more for the serious student who's willing to sit here to listen and who isn't shy about having to do more of a deep study about things. If you want a shorter version, I have covered this in some ways in different times in the past, but there's also shorter versions of this on the internet somewhere else if you want just a quick, easy rundown. Anyway, so let's begin. So we're talking about, specifically today, we're talking about the coming of the light, because we're coming into Yule, Christmas to the Christians, or to the greater Western population, Yule to the heathen or the pagan, and the underworld to the Astrotheologists, which is mostly what we're going to be talking about today. I don't know if that's a real word, Astrotheologists. I don't know. Anyway, we're talking about the coming of the light because it's the time of season that we're in. And so astrotheology is a term that a lot of people who are kind of new to this area of thought has never really heard before. And so they skip a lot of things explanation for what this is. Astrotheology is the study and the belief that planetary bodies are gods or act as gods. The more in-depth, lengthy explanation is the belief that astrotheology is really, in essence, the understanding that the stories of the gods are actually describing celestial activities as a great clock. In essence, it's the study of fate. One of the things that happens is as you kind of get far enough into this, you kind of start having to specialize, because each of these things that we talk about really are schools in their own right. Huge, in-depth, lifetimes worth of study. And a lot of what I end up having to do is basically, it's like, I think Manly Hall described it this way too, where it's like walking through a vast library and just pointing at the books and saying, look, this book exists. So, I mean, even though this is going to be a longer talk, it's going to be there's a lot more to it than I'm going to possibly ever be able to cover in an entire lifetime. And indeed, there's going to be people out there who will be much better suited to talk about this in greater detail because they've simply studied it longer than I have. So now we have to kind of get into the arcanum of what this is. So we've discussed in the past what the first arcanum is. And if you remember what the first arcanum of the mysteries are, it's that you're dead. This is the underworld. And so how's it going? So if you understand that first, then all these other things start to make sense. And even if we're being more realistic, come on, Lily, got my dog with me. And so if we want to be more realistic, you could say that the whole first section of the world tree, the first section of the Odinic mysteries, is all underworld knowledge. Everything you learn in this section is all designed so that you can understand everything that kind of comes up above it. And that includes all the philosophy, the underworld philosophy, kind of getting the baseline information down so you can understand stuff that comes up later. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? Okay. So, the way this works, the way the story goes is like this. Now you have to understand, remember, that story, the purpose of story, the purpose of myth, is to give you a base, it's the best way of explaining it. So it's a bit like saying, so the way story operates is to give you something to measure off of when you're beginning. Right. So at the very base level, right, like you said, at the base exoteric religious level, you have a story, and the story is taken in a very literal way. Jesus is a literal person who literally lived, sorry for the stutter, and who died on a cross in a literal way, who rose in a literal way, who walked on the water in a literal way. Odin is a literal god who literally hung on a world tree, who actually had affairs with Freya, right? Excuse me. And so this is the baseline story. But what the mysteries understand is that story is there to kind of give you a launching off point, because the human mind we require things, we require something to measure things off of, which is why stories are so important to us, which is why myth is so important to us. Why we use myth to help us understand morality and cause and effect, and to use it as an explanation for higher ideas. And so that's why we use the story. So the story isn't meant to be taken in a literal way. The story is a key. The story is the means, so to speak. It's the groundwork for which you could lay the ladder on top of, the firm foundation for your ladder to get you off the ground and into the higher planes. So the story is very important into understanding higher degrees of understanding. Do you understand? So the way the story goes is a little bit like this. There's two different races, I guess you could say, or two different peoples on Earth. You have what you could call the illuminated ones, or the Praksakti, or what have you, the set apart people who are illuminated by a ray of autumn to we'll say, like, if we're going to talk about, like, the Egyptian mysteries. And autumn, spelled just like the season, A-T-U-M. Sorry, I'm going up a hill. I'm a little out of breath. I've been in a migraine for days. So I haven't been out for a walk in a while, and I'm a little winded. But that is just part of why you listen to me, because I'm human. For better or for worse, I'm human. And it's just like you're out here on a walk with me, huh? Which is what I like to tell myself. Anyway, so autumn is the creator of all things, the self-created one in the Egyptian mystery school system. Right? He's the all. He's the equivalent of the Tao. The Tao, if you study Chinese mystery schools, is kind of the underlying force behind all manifold and knowable things in the universe. He's the world tree. The creator of all things is the world tree. In the Norse mysteries, he's the underlying force of all things. So by being illuminated by autumn, the all, the creator of all things, you basically, what this means is that you have seen the true reality of things. You've become awake. You've been given a torch for which things are all illuminated. And in doing so, you see the matrix, so to speak, for what it is. And you become enamored with your creator. And at which point you desire more than anything else to study the creation in order to understand and come to love its creator.
You must understand, then, that God is pre-existent and ever-existent, and that He alone made all things and created by His will the things that are. And when the Creator had made the ordered universe, He willed to set in order the earth also. And so He sent down man, a mortal creature made in the image of an immortal being, to be an embellishment of the divine body. For it is man's function, here it comes, the purpose of man, For, according to Book 4, for it is man's function to contemplate the works of God, and for this purpose he was made, that he might view the universe with wondering awe and come to know its maker. Man has this advantage over all other living beings, that he possesses mind and speech. Now speech, my son, God imparted to all men, but mind he did not impart to all. Not that he grudged it to any, for the grudging temper does not start from heaven above, but comes from being here below, in the souls of those men who are devoid of mind. This introduces the concept of an elect, or a perfecti, a hierarchy of human accomplishment and understanding, and this is also basic to Gnosticism. It's not for everyone, they're saying. It's for the pure of heart. And then what pure of heart means depends on the school you're looking at. You know, for some, it was mathematical accomplishment. For others, it was contact with the logos. For others, it was an ability to resist the temptations of the senses. But there was always this sense of the higher and lower possibility within the human experience. Everybody with me so far?
And the gods represent certain forms and functions of this system. So, and so that's kind of where you have that group of people who have been essentially illuminated by this force of nature. And so, and that's one group. And then you have the other group, who is essentially everyone else. The people who are essentially asleep. And these people are controlled entirely by fate. The first group who the system has become illuminated by the great ray of the Creator, so to speak, the Illuminati, quote unquote, to borrow a name from modern parlance, because they see the internal workings of things, they can escape, should they wish, the clutches of fate. But the people who do not see the inner workings of things, because they cannot see, therefore they're subject to the whims of their environment. They're subject to the ebb and flow of the Tao, so to speak. And the great clock is the study of, or is essentially the thing that keeps all of that energetically that keeps that system all energetically contained. So you could think of, like, say, the wheel of the zodiac, the constellations, the tides of the planets as they move in their orbits, the sun, the phases of the moon. All of this is put in place to, in a sense, through like vibration, sound, and light, create a certain, it affects events, so to speak, I feel like I'm not doing a very good job. It affects events and people's personalities, so to speak, on a lower level. And if you only exist on a lower level, then you can't escape. You're forced to stick with this whim, on the whims of these things. This is also called astrology. The study, their astrotheology and astrology are kind of similar but different. I would say that the major difference between these two things is really one sees the stars and the sun and the bodies, including the earth that you stand on, as more or less alive, and one is a lot more removed and just sees it more as just more of a colder science. Just to put it more simply. Anyway, so what does this have anything to do? Oh, and so if you want to know more about this, you want to read this, because I get asked this a lot. If you want to know some of the source texts from this, you could read the Hermetica. Talks about this. The Gnostic scriptures, they talk about this. It's out there, right? There's a lot of places for this. And you also get into, if you study myth more broadly, the rise and fall of the gods, for example, you can find it in there too. But in what's the word I'm thinking of? Yeah, so it's definitely there, but if you read the myths, it's not going to just come out and say it, right? The Hermetica will come out and say it. The Gnostic scriptures will come out and say it, but it's still out there. Right? If you want to find it, it's just anyway. I want to move on. So that's kind of the arcanum to kind of get us in the door. So it's if you understand that these things are essentially a fate-creating clock in which things vibrate and affect us on a lower level, then you understand why the study of this is so important. So, astrotheology. Time to kind of get into part 2. Astrotheology, again, is the study of all the planets in the Great Clock. But more specifically, what we're dealing with here, and when we want to talk about Yule, which is what we're coming up to now in winter solstice, we're talking about the year wheel and the way that the sun moves through the year. So there's essentially, when we're dealing with the clock that is concerned with the sun, and there's several clocks at work. There's actually 3 main clocks for what we call heliocentric models of philosophy. All right. The sun worship is kind of what we're talking about here. There's actually, do I have time? I have time. I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to figure if you made it this far, you're going to stick with me. So there's essentially 2 mystery schools. You have the new one and you have the old one. The old one comes out of pre-pharaonic and Old Kingdom Egypt. I guess you could say that it's represented in the Celtic mythologies, the Norse mythologies, India, Maya, Native American. They all share a very specific set of mysteries. Okay? And then you have the new set that comes out of, and so what the old system does is the old system believes in a 2-parent system, which we talk about a lot. You have a duad system where you have the night is as equally, and if not more important, than the day. These things are measured in balance and are required parts of a system of understanding. The duad, the tetrad, and Pythagoras, he talks a lot about these. You have the monad who gives birth to the duad, and in order to create balance between the two, they have a birth to a son who creates, it's called the Pyxius, for some reason I can't remember. It's the two circles, that kind of come together in the middle. It has the almond shape. Anyway, it's called a tetrad, or the three parents, or the two parents and their beloved son. Anyway, the old system sees that. It was built upon that system, night and day. And which is the system that I'm a part of. You have the new system, which is which kind of came out of, this goes against common knowledge. I want you to know that. All right, so this isn't going to be really supported by other people, but this is the way I've been taught and the way I understand it. So take this for what it's worth. Believe me or don't. It doesn't really matter. But the new system comes out of Sumer, Babylon, and then comes into Greek, and then into Roman, and then into our Western thought. And this worldview, this Western worldview, the new worldview, is a heliocentric model of the universe. I'm not necessarily talking about flat Earth, but I think if you are flat Earth, you will find no problem with me describing it this way. And that is the heliocentric model where everything is measured against the sun. The old way, everything is measured against the moon and the cycles of the moon in a 28-day cycle. The new way is measured against the sun, what the sun is doing, and the sun's cycle as it goes through the cosmos. So when we're talking about the sun wheel and the solar cults, what we're talking about is the movement of the sun, the new system, which is where a lot of our modern holidays come from. And the solstices and equinoxes and the worship of the sun, and the solar cults, which is why once you start getting out of Old Kingdom Egypt, you have the arrival of Yehovah, or Jehovah, which is I bring that up because I'm a big fan of the Gnostics and I follow their doctrine quite closely. The arrival of Jehovah is the arrival of kind of believe me or don't, but this is the way their philosophy works, is the arrival of the false god, or I guess you could call it the devil. And he brought in a monetary system, he brought in war. He's the angry god of the Bible who likes to kill his own people when they do something wrong. All of this, he's the one who demands bloody sacrifice. And he's essentially the main god. And which is why when you start digging deep enough, you start most of these religions all end up at either the sun or Saturn. And that's kind of I know that's controversial to say, but that's just kind of what happens. And Christianity and Judaism and a lot of this stuff really boils down into following the sun. Sorry. I know like I said, I want to get you the information so we know what we're talking about. So what we're doing because we're coming into Yule, and this is part of the new system, part of the new Western, the new Western, New World sun worship ideology, right? So the coming of the light, which is what we celebrate in Yule. So you have what's called a sun wheel, which is basically you have a circle with a cross in the middle of it, and so you have summer solstice at the very top. You have winter solstice at the bottom. You have the spring equinox over where you would say would be the east. If you're looking, or I'm sorry, not the east. The spring equinox is over here. If you're looking at the picture and it's facing you, it's at your left-hand side, or where the east would be if you're looking at a compass, and the fall equinox, which is over, if you're looking at a compass, it'd be on the west, where west would be over on the right-hand side. And so this is the way you measure the loop of the sun. Lily, heel. Did I say I had my dog with me? I think I did. Anyway, so you have the sun wheel, and so there's actually 3 clocks when we're dealing with the heliocentric clock. You have the clock that governs the day, where the sun will go clockwise, counterclockwise, if we're looking at the circle. The small cog, it goes counterclockwise through the circle, where it rises in the east over where the fall equinox would be, and goes sets in the west, or where the east would be, or on the rises in the right hand side and sets in the left hand side. If we're visualizing this in terms of the medium-sized cog, so we're dealing with a clock here. You know the way that cogs work. You know, when they're rotating together, they actually rotate opposite. So you have so if you're dealing with the year, it switches, and so it goes counterclockwise. So it goes opposite. So it rises over here on the left-hand side, and then when it reaches 12 noon, so to speak. I'm trying to explain this so that people on the podcast can understand it too. So it rises, so at about 12 noon is winter solstice. The sun begins to die in strength. It gets darker until you get to the fall equinox, where the sun is on its way down. This is like around Halloween, so to speak, or just before Halloween. And then we go into Halloween, Samhain, which is where it says the sun is in rapid decline. Then we get to winter solstice, which is probably in and around the time I'll get this video up, give or take a day. The sun is fully dead, is in the grave for 3 days. And then on December 25th, that usually happens, winter solstice is usually around the 21st or 22nd. And then Christmas, the birth of the sun, happens at December 25th, where Jesus, so to speak, is born in the manger, or Sol Invictus, which is where we get the name for the sun, Sol, which is where we get the word solar system from. Sol Invictus is a Roman sun god. And then it begins to rise in power after he's born, and he starts its ministry in the spring, where Jesus turns the water into wine, right? And that's when he starts his ministry, and then it grows to full power back at the summer solstice. And that's the medium-sized cog. The big-sized cog is actually called the great year, and it switches direction again, because remember, we're dealing with, think of it like cogs on a wheel. It switches direction again, and then you have what's called the great year, where the sun moves due to precession through the 12 signs of the zodiac in the great year. All right, and this is this is called the solar clock. And then there's even bigger cog, where we're dealing with millions of years, having to do with the rotation of the sun and the whole solar system as it moves through the Milky Way, which is beyond. I'm sure some smart guy out there could figure that one out, but that's beyond even what I'm willing to contemplate at this time. Anyway, so that's kind of the way the great clock works. Anyway, so the birth of the sun, or the coming of the sun, happens on Christmas. It happens on Yule. And the way it works is the ancients weren't stupid. They're able to look at the sun. So now I guess we're... Lily, no. The ancients weren't stupid. They were able to look up at the sky and follow the sun. They paid attention to when the sun rises, when it starts to fall, and all that good stuff. So they noticed that in midsummer, the that the sun would rise, then suddenly it would stop, and it stays up there for 3 days, and then it starts a decline, and then it starts falling for about 6 months. The days get shorter, nights get longer, it starts getting colder and colder, until we start getting into about the midwinter nights. Ever heard that term? Until the sun falls as far as it's going to, and then stops. This is when, if you follow the Christian pantheon, the Christian way of looking at things, the Christian mysteries, which is a solar observing, which is part of the New World system, where the sun essentially represents the trek of the sun through the sky. I should make sure this is even still recording. Let's see here. Is this still recording? I have my phone in my back pocket. Oh, it's still recording. Yay! All right. What was I saying? Yes. So if you follow like the Christian mysteries, for example, follows the cycle where he starts his ministry, like I said, at the wedding feast at Cana, which was a yearly festival every year in Cana, where they say that the sun marries the earth, and the sun, of course, makes the clouds come and then waters the earth with its sacred liquid, and then makes the grapes grow, and then they turn the grapes into wine, and therefore it was said that the Son of God turns the water into wine. And then as the sun progresses throughout the year, he reaches the height of his ministry, and then he is murdered at, he gets hung on the cross of the zodiac and begins to die in or around the fall equinox. There's actually a big constellation there that's called the Southern Cross. It's actually spelled Crux, C-R-U-X. And so the sun begins to die in that constellation until it's stabbed with the spear of Scorpio, which is Samhain or Halloween, at which point the sun is in rapid decline, then is officially dead at winter solstice, which is on the 21st. And he's in the underworld for 3 days. And then on December 25th, the festival of Yule, right? The festival of Yule, Christmas, the sun is reborn. So in Norse terms, you have if you follow you can argue about the chronology, and that's fine, but you have all the stories of the gods, from the creation of their wall, through all their shenanigans, until you get to the death of Balder. The death of Balder, which happens in the fall equinox, and he has his journey into the underworld, where it's all the world weeps because the sun has died. Ragnarok happens on December 21st, when all the lights go out, the world is in mourning, and then at the end of Ragnarok, Balder is reborn and comes back into maturity, and then Balder comes back to life in the fall, or I'm sorry, the spring equinox. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty cool, huh? So that's why, we'll go back to the Christian mysteries, for example. Leading up to the birth of Jesus, who's the Son, you have all that nighttime imagery, right? They go to Bethlehem, and there's this, the star in the sky, and you have the three wise men, the three stars in Orion's belt, the star in the east, which is the star of Sirius, who points to where the sun is going to rise. It's going to rise on winter solstice, or at Christmas time. And then Jesus, they don't have a place to stay. It's late at night. They come to Bethlehem, and then Jesus the Son is born in the wee hours of the morning. Lily, come on, feel. Okay, there's a reason why these things are all put this way, for this reason. And so that's why we say that winter solstice, my family, on my dad's side, is all, me, my dad, and most of my friends are all pagan to some degree or another. So our main celebration of the year, the biggest festival for us, is winter solstice. We have a huge feast. We have friends over, and we eat and drink and make merry and pass gifts, and usually homemade. Making cheese logs and cookies and, handmade goods and that kind of stuff. We pass those back and forth to everybody. And then my wife's side of the family is all pretty traditional, so we celebrate Christmas with her family. But the big celebration for sure every year is that of winter solstice. And really, no, Yule. And winter solstice is you've just gone through all those years of winter, all those months of winter. The crops are dead. the lights have gone out. It's getting colder, and it's going to continue to get colder for the next few months. And so your stores are starting to feel the pinch. But it's that hope that the light is going to come back into the world, that the sun is going to return and illuminate the world in springtime. And you know that's still going to get colder. You know that it's still, the worst part of winter is still ahead. But at the end of that, if you could just hold out, the sun is coming back. And so, just like the ancients did, we symbolically, that's why you have Yule logs, and that's why the Jews light the candles. You have all this light imagery, because the symbols, you have all this light imagery, and all these new world, I guess you could say mystery school systems, is because they're based on the sun, and the sun is coming back. Okay. Because I'm part of the old, I guess you could say, the mystery school I'm part of is part of the old world. We follow both things. We acknowledge the sun's presence, which you'd be a fool not to, but we also acknowledge the clock that exists at nighttime. The moon, the cycles of the moon, and all that. But you have to, you have to have balance. You have to understand that you have both a mother and a father. Without a mother and a father, you wouldn't be here. And so, the clock might have many cogs, but it is still one clock. And that's kind of the great study of the mysteries. It's one of the biggest things that we believe, is that all things ultimately are one thing. And that the study of the great clock is kind of a representation of that thing. You have different gods who have different aspects to their characters. You do different things energetically to a person who sets the fates and fixes the fates of man and beast and bird and reptile and every creeping and crawling thing. But the gods, like man, are all part of one clock, one thing. Everything is one thing. So even though we celebrate Yule in our family, we still have the acknowledgement. We still have the acknowledgement that all ultimately belongs to one thing and one thing only. And that's the creator of all things. Which is why I've always maintained, and why I stopped saying things like this in the heathen forums. You go to Also True forums, that kind of stuff, that you really want to piss them off. You can say that there is in fact a creator of all things, and that really pisses them off. But that's because you could have one God and many gods at the same time. And that is, some people dig it and some people hate it. And I'm just here to teach the truth to the best that I am able to understand it. If you know what I mean. So, I know this took a while, and I know it's confusing, and I understand that, but this is the book. This is one book in one school, and if you're willing to take the time to learn it, there's a lot you can gain from it. Each new story unfolds new stories within it. You know, at some point, the old story that started the whole process kind of gives way to new and exciting mysteries beneath it. And those mysteries form a new understanding for which gives you a brand new yardstick for which to measure truth off of. Which could be really frustrating to the people who don't understand this kind of philosophy. You know, which is why, you know, people say, so, are the gods real? I'll say, yes, also they're not. People will say, is God real? Is there a God? And I'll say, yes, there is. And there isn't. And it frustrates the hell out of people. And I get it. And that's because we're looking at, how do you explain this? You're looking at things from a different point of view, right? Where the student might only be aware of one story. The student might be only aware of the story of Jesus, for example, or the story of Odin, or Shiva, or one thing. The master, I'm not claiming I am one, but I'm just saying that the person who's been at it for a long time and has progressed along the path a long time sees a lot of the other cogs that are spinning. And because they've been at it for a long time, there is a level of understanding of the way that things work that goes beyond just a literal understanding of the way things work, right? Or not a little understanding of the way things work, but a literal understanding of the story. A literal Jesus, a literal death on the cross, as opposed to seeing the next cog down, the next story down, which is first story is Jesus, that helps you understand the story of the sun. Then you understand the story of the sun, which helps you understand the story of the moon and the stars and the rotation of the equinoxes. And the next story from that is something beyond that even. And it's not just a story of Jesus, the sun, the moon and stars, equinoxes. Then it's the story of galaxies, an interplay of constellations, and the relationships between bigger and bigger gods, far beyond our ability to even begin to understand. Is that clear as mud? Does that make sense? And I hope that makes sense. I hope that that's not too confusing. And let's see, put my phone out of my pocket and let's see how long this is. It's under an hour. Wow. Okay, I thought it was going to take a lot longer than that to get through all that. But, well, that's exciting. Okay, I was thinking, this is going to take 2 hours to get through. But apparently it didn't. Feel. So that's really quite exciting. All right. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed. I know there's going to be questions, and that's fine. Okay. I hope you have a happy Yule. Heal. Hope you have a happy Yule, and that you not too confused, but heal. The mysteries are sort of confusing, you know? So that's just kind of the trouble with it. All right, now I'm back on the road. Hope you'll have a happy holiday season, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.